Well, we like to have people who are experts in the field whenever we talk about these kinds of things. And so I'm glad you were able to come on and give us some insight to this poll. And speaking of which, it goes back to 1995. So we're going to get into some of the trends, which I think is another interesting bit out of this. This is actually a poll of voters. So there's a lot of political insight, which is kind of our wheelhouse here at the Reload, guns and politics. And so I think there's a lot we can go over. But the top line in this poll, really, to me at least, and I'll just see if you agree, is that it found a huge increase in gun ownership among American voters. And now, for the first time ever, a majority of American voters report having a gun in their home.
Yeah, I mean, more Americans being armed than ever before is a pretty big headline, considering the politics of gun ownership and gun rights in America. So it's the first time that's happened in our poll, going back for 20 years that we've asked the question. Over 20 years we've asked the question, and it was a 6-point increase from the last time we asked it in 2019. So the COVID years, the time after that, there's a lot of evidence to say that those years did see an increase in gun ownership, and not much public polling that picked that up. And so we were kind of not surprised, but interested that came to light in our poll. And like anything else, polls vary from one to another. There is a margin of error and everything else, but we were comfortable enough that the rise was and where it was happening definitely made sense with some of the evidence that we knew about in those COVID years and thereafter.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's the prime takeaway here from this poll. When I look at it, is it's further evidence of these trends that we have been discussing for the last 3 years. That we've seen from obviously anecdotal evidence, which is your least reliable type, right? But also from industry dealer surveys was where some of the first numbers came from for how many new gun owners we estimate came into the market during that period, which is, that it's a little more scientific, but not quite the same as the poll that you guys conducted. And then we got some research from University of California, I think, looked into this question of rising gun ownership, especially among minorities and people who, women, people who haven't traditionally been associated with gun ownership in America as strongly. We'll get into some of that later, but I think the top line here is just that you found the increase, which you've seen an increase in some of the other polls. The Associated Press, for instance, their number of guns in the home is up at 46%, which was a several point increase over the pre-pandemic numbers. You haven't seen as much of an increase from, I think, some of the other surveys like Pew Research. Can you walk us through why you think there might be a difference in what you guys found versus what some of these other major media polls have found? Do you think the fact that you're looking at voters instead of adults plays any role at all? How do you break that out?
The difference between voters and adults shouldn't make too much of a difference, though. The difference could be, if you're talking about other polls have shown an increase, but they went from, say, 41 to 46 or something like that. I think that would be not a difference. I think that would reinforce the trend that we found in our poll, because it's not so much, okay, are you both getting to 52? It's over time. This is how you read polling. You look at the trend line. Is the trend line moving? Meaning, if you ask the same question the same way to the same audience, over time, is that moving the number? And so, again, I think moving any amount, 6 points, 6 points, it's important. And this one just kind of caught more attention because it was a majority. We're so fixated on a majority in our politics that this one, might have spiked a little bit. I love Pew. Pew is an extremely reputable, we work with them all the time, extremely thoughtful research organization. The difference in their methodology could be a difference in why you don't see an increase there, mainly because they have switched to and done thoughtful research to support this switch to using a panel that they've created, curated, and maintained. But those people do know that they are taking a Pew survey, and they are typically the same people that answer those surveys. So we're getting a random sample from a voter file. Most surveys still do it that way. We do phone surveys. Lots of surveys do online. You might get some different numbers if you did this online. There's a little bit less social desirability. People might not be comfortable saying that they own a gun or have a gun in the household on the phone with somebody, and they might be more comfortable to click that box online, or vice versa. People have different, levels of personal security. But in general, I think we're going to see this number increase over time. And this was just a kind of a demarcation point that we got over 50.